Must have been sometime in March. Sometimes I'd hear Dad talking to Mom. It seems like it was mostly at night. It was the time when the snow melts in the daytime and then freezes at night. It was a few nights in a row I could hear Dad saying something to Mom. I'd just calm myself down and try to go sleep. But it would seem like I could hear Dad as clear as if we were in a crystal ball or a bubble. He was saying that we'd have to go to flat, and we would have to go at night. At night? We couldn't see anything. But then I heard the answer. It was when the wolves started howling. And it was why our dogs were not howling. It was not far away. Dad said that it was a scout wolf. And now it was acting as a sentinel wolf. It had found prey and was calling the pack to food. These wolves were starving. There had been plenty for them to eat just a couple years before. Then they had multiplied to offset the balance. And now there were way too many, and they were hunting hard. The airplane was supposed to come and bring us to Holy Cross. This was Iditarod. It didn't seem like we were running out of food, but I remember the dogs were running out. The trouble was, the wolves must be starving. Trapping hadn't been that good either. Now we couldn't wait for the airplane anymore. It would already be too soft for the plane to land on the ice, because the ice was starting to rumble. Mom was not for it at all. She was against it, thinking that the plane would come late in the afternoon when the ice was starting to freeze, and it would be easy to take off then, slick and fast. But Dad said the plane would have been here by now, and that the pilot was trying to tell him something by not being here already. Maybe there was some sort of emergency. Well, Dad said we would get ready and go about 3 a.m. Mom was scared about those wolves. But Dad said we couldn't tell the kids, because above all, the kids would have to be quiet. It was Dad, Mom, Eva, Manny, Bing, and me. Bing was the baby. And that's how we rode in the sled, too. So this meant that I would be in front of the sled. Darn! I really didn't like that spot because if there was wind, it would hit me in the face first. Everyone else would be in a warmer area. But it also meant that I could see everything. If anything could be seen, I'd see it. Okay. So then Dad gave the instructions. After everything was packed up, which wouldn't be very much because we were running, we wouldn't even have the fish to carry it because we were out of food. Wow, this is going to be different. Usually we carried everything with us, and it took us a long time to go anywhere. We were like a snail, carrying everything with us. This time we were running. That's how it would be. Mom would look on the left side of the sled and not look anywhere else. She hardly would have time to blink. She would not look to the right no matter what. Hers was to watch the left side, just a short area. But this was a critical spot for her. Dad would watch the right side. This is the way the wolves operate. And they don't change in the attack. Attack? What the heck is an attack? Did Dad mean those wolves were going to attack us? Dad's voice was very sure. I heard that tone of voice when he would talk with those men about how this and that would be in the process of happening. It was always life and death in those days, and it was exciting. The animals and us. Always in the running. But But mostly it was them running, not us. Oh, woe is me. I could hardly even run. Dad made up for us. He knew his dogs, and he knew his wife. She always listened and helped. And we listened, or die. That's what Dad always taught us. We listen. Now the wolf comes even to us. Mom would poke Dad. Now if the wolf is gaining and going ahead, Dad would be alerted. Now if the wolf started to attack the lead dog, Dad would shoot him. Because then the other wolves would stop to gorge on its body. Then we would have a chance to run. Maybe we would have to shoot 2 of them, because they would come from both sides. But the lead wolf would always attack the lead dog first. That's how they operate. That wolf gets the lead dog, mostly the dog would just lie down, because they know that they were just going to die. So sometimes the wolves are starting to attack, the dogs would just lay down. All of them. Oh God, the dogs would just lay down? I've seen those dogs fight. I've seen them be fearless. I've heard them howling. I helped cook for them. Dad would never let us play with those pups. We couldn't even pet them. He trained them. He found a lead dog. He trained him. He told us that it was important that we never lay a hand on those dogs, because they were his dogs and they needed to listen to him only. They needed to know his voice. We knew his voice too. This is why Dad always kept his hands clean and stuff like that. Always washing his hands. And he would always use his own cup. And he wanted us to be like that too. He said they could smell us. He was always thinking about what they thought. Us too. Well, first Dad would put the iron runners on the big sled. Everything else had to stay. So packing things away for next fall time was pretty easy. And then he would rub those iron runners. Man, those runners were fast and slick. You could get into a snowbank real easy with those runners. But that was it. We had to use them and hope to heaven we wouldn't be overturned in the snow. It was melting, so it wasn't firm. We didn't know how the trail would be. There was no one else around, so we didn't know about the conditions of the trail. Eventually, I fell asleep. Well, next thing, I was wide awake, and everyone was moving around, packing up. Somehow, the dogs were sober, without a sound. But I could see that Dad's lead dog was wagging his tail at Dad. So we just kept up the fast, steady pace of leaving. It seemed to have a finality to it. Just looking at the cabin, no smoke, doors all closed, nothing was making noise. The air was crisp, but not biting cold. The wind was still. Even the tall brown grasses were still on the bank, like they were holding their breath, waiting. Were they waiting for us to die? How would it be? Do we scream? Or would we be just like the dogs and lie there? The wolves know how to kill by the throat, the jugular. They like the heart, the liver, and the brain. Well, Manny knew how to hitch up the dogs. He always put the harness down in the direction they would be heading. The lead dog would be first, and he would hold the line taut for the other dogs, because he would be eager to get going. Well, they never barked as usual, but came quickly. We loaded up, and we were off. It was so fast. We were flying across the tundra. I would turn to see if Mom was watching, but I could hardly see her. I watched the side too. Then I would watch the other side. I didn't even get sleepy like I usually do when we set out on a long journey. It was clear, and the moon was shining brightly. It was cold, and the trees were black looking. The dogs were all running like they knew what was happening. Now, I remember that Dad said if one of the dogs fell, he would quickly cut the dog loose, and we would leave it. If we had the time, but we would have to make the time, because the wolves would stop to eat. They knew we were their next meal. That was why we could hear them every night. They were starving, and there was a lot of them. More of them than us. I don't know how it happened, but I did fall asleep. I don't know for how long. I tried to keep my eyes open, but it was too hard, and that wind was in my eyes, even if I blinked a lot. I think it was because everyone else was sleeping. Next thing, I woke up wide awake again and remembered what we were doing. Something was in the air, and I knew that the wolves had come. I could feel Dad and Mom. They were alert and watching. I don't know how Mom ever did it. She was watching her side, and I could see them running. It seemed like they were just running. They could see perfectly. They were not hurrying, not looking at us, just running on both sides. And I looked at the dogs. And it seemed like Dad said something about their tails. Their tails went down. They were not doing good. As long as they didn't put their tails between their legs. I noticed their tails were up. And I could see the lead dog's tail. It was not all the way up, but his ears were switching back and forth. He was listening to the front and to the back. And the dogs were all pacing, not galloping, so that was good. Galloping would make them tired soon. And I knew for sure my dad had the gun ready. I've seen my dad shoot before and he drops them with one shot. But which one was the lead wolf? The left-hand side started in, so did the right-hand. And the dogs never varied, they just kept on running. Now which one was the lead wolf? No shooting until you could tell. They were running like shadows on both sides. Dogs, don't be afraid, don't lay down. Don't gallop. Just keep right on following the leader. I've seen that leader many times. If one of the dogs dropped while he was on the trail, that leader would come back and fight the dog right then and there. Sometimes the other dogs would join in, and Dad never stopped them. If that dog was not good enough to run in the team, he would not survive. If he didn't make the grade, he'd have to be shot. I didn't have a lazy dog, the one who could learn to get away with laying down. Now I saw why. If the dogs lay down, we could all die. Well, Mom said it was one on the left. She was talking out loud, not shouting, but talking. Because it was too late. They were closing in. Just like that, it was no longer happening, and the dog sensed it as the wolves fell behind. It looks like my dad's got a guardian angel that shows up for him when the chips are down. And I also found out that mine's with me all the time. And we're still moving across the tundra and through the snow. Pretty soon the day was getting a little brighter. We arrived in Flat a short time later without anything else happening. And I don't know if the other kids saw what happened, but we never did talk about it. It just seemed like we were getting ready to board the plane, and we never did feed the dogs. But they were just as excited as we were, all to be leaving on the plane to Holy Cross. Maybe they knew they'd soon be gorging away on king salmon for being such good dogs and doing the right thing. I could tell that Dad was very confident in taking care of those dogs just as he was in taking care of us kids. And Mom was steady as ever too. All of us were smiling and happy to be on our way to fish camp. We'd see everyone in the village. There we could make a bit of noise, see the people in the church, have some fun, and make our way to the camp. I was hoping those wolves didn't do as good as our dogs this summer. But we never heard of wolves in the summer. It was the bears you had to watch for in the summer. But they were a lot easier to see. It was learning how to listen. All the messages from the wilds of our home. We found out later from the pilot that a woman from Anvik had complications in childbirth, and the plane had to respond to that emergency. Pilot figured that we would just wait or come out. Either way, he'd find out when he was done. Dad sent a telegraph to Bethel from Flat to alert the pilot that we'd come out. They'd talk about it later, and so would I. Well, what a scene, huh? Check this one out. My mom's own beadwork about the very story we're talking about. She got the cabin, northern lights, the cache, the sled, the wolves, everything. So smart, my mama's. Top of her beaded box, which is now mine and my favorite possession.